Well, Bungie was back this week with their This Week at Bungie update, going into more details about the Trials of Osiris, plus we got further developments that are happening this weekend. The flawless pool is no more, plus we got news of the future of freelance in Trials, and a nice little deep dive into the stats and analysis of how Trials is doing. Well, if you're new around here or find this useful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for all the latest Destiny 2 content, and turn on notifications by hitting that bell. Well, Bungie said this week in their This Week at Bungie update, the last few weekends of Trials of Osiris have been a bit quieter in terms of changes, and this was by design. We wanted to give players a few weekends of steady play before making any more significant changes or testing out another labs weekend. This gave our team some great data for how Trials is doing and how players are engaging with the activities and what we could prioritise changing in the future. So a quick recap of the stats from the last few weeks show everything to be steady too. Matchmaking times are consistent with the past weeks, and blowout rates drop slightly week over week, and this is consistent with lower skilled players not playing as much. Average hours played per player remains consistent across skill levels, and overall player counts were down each week, but that is expected during this portion of the season and is consistent with past Trials and Iron Banner performance. We still don't see any evidence of widespread flawless card resets to avoid the flawless pool. Less than 0.5% of cards played were reset while still flawless, and above 3 wins. Even still, the impetus to do this should be removed starting this week, but more on that coming soon. Well, now we look to freelance. So last weekend we gave players strictly a solo queue option for Trials, and we entered the weekend with some assumptions on how the population could split, what might happen to matchmaking times, and a few questions on how to offer freelance options in the future. So here's a quick recap from the team on how things went, what we learned, and what we're thinking about for the future. So we're going to start off with freelance. So this past week we opened up the freelance queue so that solo players could consistently play against other groups of solos. So how did that feel? So we had 1 million games played in each playlist this weekend, which is slightly more games played in the base Trials of Osiris playlist. Average hours played for the lowest skilled players is up quite a bit over the past weeks, while the average to the top end is almost the same hours played. So interestingly, players who played in a fire team some of the time and solo some of the time played almost 3 times as long this weekend as players who either played exclusively solo or in a fire team. So looking at the numbers, we had 244,000 freelance exclusive players, 120,000 fireteam exclusive players, and 220,000 that played both solo and in a fireteam. So 25.5% of players went flawless, lower than any other revamp week, and likely fall out of matches being fairer. If it doesn't drop below 20% for a weekend, the Lighthouse should still feel attainable. Average matchmaking times were consistently around 50 seconds for full fireteams and solos, and regularly were about 100 seconds for duos. The Sunday flawless pool adds about 10 seconds to the flawless player matchmaking, and we're seeing some worrying spikes in matchmaking times for some of the smaller sub-pools post-flawless pool split. And the overall blowout rate, that's games that ended up with a score of 5-0, was almost as low as our best post-revamp week when the flawless pool went active on Friday afternoon at 27.8%. And this was powered by the significant number of fireteam versus fireteam matches and solo versus solo matches, both which had 25% blowout rates. So looking at the match outcomes this week in freelance and in base, so 5-0 games was 25.1% in freelance, 30.2% in base, 5-1 it was 26.1, 25.7, 5-2, 20.4, 18.5, 5-3, 15.6, 13.9, and then 5-4, 12.4 and 11.4%. So one thing we aren't happy about is with the team balance, and we've noticed that how the solo playlist isn't doing a great job balancing 2 teams when there aren't any fire team mismatches. For Trials, it's currently just picking teams randomly, and we could be looking very carefully at how teams are selected over the next few weeks, and hopefully have a better balance for next time. And hopefully have a better balance for the next time freelance rolls around. This is one of the downsides of not using skill-based matchmaking in Trials. In situations where skill would be helpful to balance 2 teams of solo players, it isn't even a data point the system can look at. But speaking of which, we got the Future of Freelance, so we like the overall outcome and the vibe of freelance queue, and both playlists seem to have a viable amount of players. So we're looking at running freelance occasionally for the remainder of the Season 15, but we're trying to determine what feels right, and we're going to let you know. Long term, we are exploring some single playlist solutions, preferential matchmaking of full fire teams against other full fire teams, duo and solo against another solo and duo, and we don't have a specific release target for this yet, but it will not be prior to Season 16. Well, next up we've got the Flawless Pool changes. So the Flawless Pool, which we've been enabling on Sunday at reset time, has some very positive benefits. It raises overall match quality, blowout rates, etc., and significantly, it raises the overall win rate of solo players. However, it has some drastic downsides. For players who struggle and manage to just barely go flawless, it's a steep cliff to then only play against players who have already gone flawless that week. It also incentivizes behavior that are at odds with the mode and the reward system, like resetting a flawless 6-win ticket to keep getting easier matches, but also worse rewards. It also creates social friction where players need to decide between playing with friends or playing for rewards. And lastly, the timing. 10 AM Pacific on Sundays is awkward if you live anywhere but the Americas. Well, starting today, we're rolling out a new system and leaning into weekly performance metrics. So whenever you match in Trials, in addition to trying to match you with people with the same number of card wins, we will also attempt to match you with people who have roughly the same number of overall wins for the weekend. And if you can't find anyone to match against, it will eventually expand out to find you a less similar match. For the PvP gods who go flawless 10 times a weekend, they will end up matching other players who have, for example, 70 plus wins on their cards, no matter how they got them. And for the average team, who gets a lucky flawless on Friday or Saturday on their first card, well, they will be matching against other players with around 7 wins, no matter how they got them. We're hoping this will give us many of the benefits of the flawless pool system, somewhat fairer matches, without these significant downsides. So specifically, there should be no major inflection point where everything is smooth prior to a win, and then everything is overly challenging after. So while this allows us to remove the flawless pool, it does have potential downsides, so longer matchmaking times. And we think that this is a reasonable trade-off here between match quality and matchmaking time. So average Trials matchmaking times currently sit around 50 seconds, and over the next few weekends we're going to be looking at how much the matchmaking time goes up and how it affects the match quality. So looking at the outcomes of the previous non-labs week, so we got game outcomes with overall percent, Fireteam versus Fireteam and all solo. So 5-0 games, it was 28.4, 22.8 and 27.6. 5-1 games, it was 25.6, 25.6 and 25.4. 5-2 games, it was 18.6, 20.2 and 19%. 5-3 was 14.7 and 16.8 and 15.4. And then 5-4 games, 12.3, 14.5 and 12.6. So, in an ideal world, we want to get each of those numbers as close to 20% as possible, but we'd rather see more 5-4 and 5-3 outcomes than 5-0 and 5-1. Well, loads of information there on Trials of Osiris and the changes. I'd love to hear what you think, and let me know down in the comments what you think of the changes in Trials. Well, that is it for all the latest news in Trials of Osiris, and as always, thank you so much for watching. For more Destiny 2 content like this, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. If you want to join the community, check out the Discord link in the description, or you can follow me on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.